I read how Dr. Martin Luther King contacted you to ask you not to drop the role of Uhura. And I do believe that Dr. King and Gene Roddenberry were correct in their vision that in growing up watching a Russian, an Asian, and a black woman on the bridge, to me it was no big deal as a kid, which is as it should be. But could you comment some on any reaction to Uhura and to you in the 60s and how you showed that a black woman can be an officer just as well as any white man?
A lot went on about that. Verso de voce. I'd rather not go into it because I want to keep everything on a high note. But let me just say that years later, to the man, funny, each time it was a man, and not one of the persons that I'm talking about was a part of Star Trek. Not one of the persons was a cast member, was a crew person, or was, of course, in front office. That was one of the most wonderful beginnings of a television film career that you could possibly have. The casting was absolutely perfect. Our interactions with one another was beautiful in that first year and half the second year, and remained that way with 99, 44, 100% of the cast. Did I say something funny? Ladies and gentlemen, Neil Schulman. You're going to be hearing a lot more from Neil Schulman tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And you thought I forgot, didn't you? It was a wondrous thing that after the first season with Star Trek, I was telling you that each and every one of those men, it was about 10 years later, and within 10 or 12 years, I saw either at a premiere or a gathering or someplace who came up, and one was when we were came back to do the film. He was still working on the lot, and to the man, he came up to me and he said, "This is what I did to you, or tried to do to you, when you were first cast, and you were such a lady. You never responded in the level of hatred that I addressed to you. And I have never forgotten it, and have never gotten over it. But I stopped being that person. Because and oddly enough, because enough people knew about enough things, they thought that I was unhappy with the role. I loved the role. They thought I was unhappy with not having enough to say. I didn't know I didn't have enough to say. I wasn't worried about taking over the ship because I was head of communications. I was able to tell everybody where to go in the universe. But after that first season, I went to Gene Roddenberry and I said, Gene, I'm not going to return to Star Trek. I've had a wonderful season with you, but as you know, my heart is the theater, and I'm being offered a wonderful role, and I think it's going to go to Broadway, and so I want to leave and pursue my real career. And Gene he was sitting at his desk, and I walked into him at the end of the day and, you know, offered him my hand, and he didn't take my hand. And I said, I wrote it out how I feel, and I'd like you to take that. And he put it there, and he was smoking the cigarette, and he looked up at me. He said, when did you decide this? And I said, I think I always wanted to do this, and but thank you for, you know, giving me this wonderful opportunity, blah-de-blah-de, blah, 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 blah. And he looked up at me and he said, I don't want you to leave, but I won't hold you, but I want you, this was a Friday evening, he said, I want you to take this weekend and think about it. Come back and we'll talk about it Monday. If you still feel the same way, you go with my blessings. And he said, but don't you understand what I'm trying to achieve? And I went home and I just thought about it and thought about it. And Saturday night, I went to an NAACP fundraiser, big event, and one of the organizers came up to me and said, Miss Nichols, I was on the dais, you know, and I'm talking, he turns, he says, Miss Nichols, there's someone who would really, really want to meet you. It's great, a big fan of Star Trek and a big fan of yours. And I said, certainly, and I stood up and I turned around and I looked at Dr. Martin Luther King. And for the first time, and possibly the last time, I was at a loss for words. I know it's difficult for you to believe, but I was literally at a loss for words. And he said in his beautiful, mellifluous tones, my whole family loves your work and the show. He says it's one of the only shows my wife and I allow our 3 little children to stay up that night and watch. He says, and the role that you play and the manner in which you play it, my little daughter said, I want to grow up and be a great lady like Lieutenant Uhura. And I was getting chill bumps. And so I said, well, thank you so much, Dr. King. I'm really going to miss being with the cast. And he says, I beg your pardon. And I said, well, I told Gene Roddenberry last night that after shooting that I was leaving the show. And he said, you can't. And I said, what you talking about, Dr. Martin Luther King? I wish I could have said that, but I just didn't say anything except, he said, don't you realize what that man is trying to do? I swear, that's what happened. He said those words. And I guess I thought I stepped out of reality and into fantasy. There's a line for a show, isn't it? He said, for the first time, not only other people that we know in our country, but the world will see us as we are supposed to be seen. As intelligent, bright, beautiful, worthy people